we're back at least for part 1 of chapter 3. So, well, did he convince the Helvetians? Did he? We'll find out. Here we go. First sentence, his rebus, or his rebus, as we would say in the past. His rebus adducti et auctoritate orgatorigis per moti constituerunt ea quae ad proficiscendum pertenerent comparare iumentorum et carorum quam maximum numerum coemere sementes quam maximas facere ut in itenere copia frumentis supeteret cum proximis civitatibus pacem et amicitiam confirmare. Oh boy, let's do that again. His rebus adducti et auctoritate orgatorigis per moti constituerunt ea quae ad proficiscendum pertenerent comparare iumentorum et carorum quam maximum numerum coemere sementes quam maximas facere ut in itenere copia frumentis supeteret cum proximis civitatibus pacem et amicitiam confirmare. So first things first, do we see any clauses? And yes, we do. We see one right here. It starts with quae. I don't know why I'm acting this way. I just feel silly. Two, pertenerent is one. Do we see any others? We see one right here in the third line, starting with ut and going to sepeteret. Now, there's probably a temptation to make quam here, this quam, and also this quam clauses. You don't know this yet, but I'll just tell you that quam maximum is an idiom that means as great as, or something like that. So quam maximum numerum would be as great a number as, and we'll get to that in just a second. Okay, so we've identified some clauses. How about prepositional phrases anywhere? Well, inside this clause, we have ad proficiscendum, which it ends in an nd. That's either a gerund or a gerundive. Think about which one it might be. If you said gerund, you are right, because it's sitting out here by its lonesome. There's no other word near it that also has an accusative ending. Moving on, are there any other prepositional phrases? Looks like there's one right here. In itenere and cum proximis civitatibus. And I believe that's it in terms of prepositional phrases. So let's talk about verbs. Where do we see them? Well, looks like the first main verb, actually the main verb of the entire sentence, is right here, constituerunt. Constituerunt. Inside this first clause, we have pertenerent, and we keep moving on. We have sepeteret right there. Now we have several other verb forms, and you probably see them. There are a few infinitives that are dependent upon this main verb constituerunt, they decided. So our first infinitive is comparare. That looks awful, but just go with it. And then we have coemere, also an infinitive. Facere. And finally, confirmare. Okay. So, now we want to take a look at, do we see nominative words, like who would be the subject of this entire sentence? And, you know, from the get-go, we do see a word that is nominative, but it's not a noun. Adducti and per moti, they look verby in the front, nouny in the back. Those are participles, perfect passive participles. They're describing an implied subject. If you look at erunt, our subject is going to be they. Who do you think they would be? Well, it's going to be the Helvetians from the previous chapter. Do we see any other words that look nominative? Well, inside this ut clause, the subject of Sepeteret is actually copia. So we have a nominative there, and that looks like that's it. Now, let's talk about direct objects. Do we see any accusative direct objects? Well, looking in this first line, just the main independent thought, if we know that they, meaning the Helvetians, would be the subject, and we know that constituerunt is the verb, look at this ea again. We've got is ea id, nominative, right? But we already have a subject, and our subject is plural, so there's no way that ea could be nominative, feminine, singular. What else could it be? The only thing that it could be would be neuter plural, either nominative or accusative, and we know what our nominative subject already is, so ea, these things right here, they would have to be the direct object of probably of comparare, of our infinitive. Moving on, do we see any other accusatives? I see numerum here. Numerum. And also sementes. Now, numerum kind of goes along with quam maximum, and sementes goes along with quam maximas. And then finally, at the very end, we have pacem and micitiam. Those are going to be direct objects as well. Any ablative words, because we love to find ablative words. Well, we start the whole sentence with his rebus. Those are ablative words, as is auctoritate. And that looks like it's it in terms of ablatives. A lot of the rest of the words, not all, but a lot of them are actually genitives. So orgatorigus, humentorum, carorum, and frumenti. Those are all genitive words. So we've drawn our roadmap. Let's do it. They, meaning the Helvetians, would be the subject. So they, having been adducted, having been led on, or by these things, something like that, and per moti, having been influenced or moved by the authority of Orgetorix, they decided to comparare, to obtain ea, and ea is going to be our direct object of comparare, to obtain the things which were pertaining to departure. And then we have to understand that this verb constituerunt is actually used with all of the other infinitives in the sentence, and they decided to coemere, which means to buy qua maximum numerum, as great a number of yoke animals and of wagons as possible. So quam plus maximum is as great as possible, basically. And they decided to make sementes quam maximus, as great a number of plantings as possible, in order to, feel like we have a purpose clause coming, so that a copia of frumenti. Copia means a supply, or could mean an abundance of something. So that an abundance of grain, supeteret, was in store along the journey, or on the journey. And then last little bit here, and they decided to strengthen peace and friendship with the neighboring what's the best way to say Kiwitas? With the neighboring tribes, I suppose you could say states. How about just states? I kept wanting to say with the neighboring citizenry, but that just kind of sounds ridiculous. So there you have it. So that's what they decided to do. They are going to go along with this plan, and they've sort of been influenced by Orgetorix. And I guess they don't really understand, though, that the plan is essentially to take over as much of Gaul as possible. Orgetorix just simply said to them, hey, we like to fight a lot of people, and we're sort of landlocked. We should just move to another place and kind of set up shop there. So they don't really understand the full extent of what Orgetorix is plotting here. They will, though, at some point very soon. So they are just doing things that they need to in order to prepare to move. They're buying lots of animals and wagons, and they're making a large number of plantings so that they'll have food, they'll have plenty of food, and they're making peace with their neighbors. Ad eas res conficiendas, biennium sibi satis esse duxerunt, in tertium annum profectionem lege confirmant. So ad eas res conficiendas, biennium sibi satis esse duxerunt, in tertium annum profectionem lege confirmant. So let's take this sentence here up to duxerunt at first. No clauses, but there is a prepositional phrase. We see it right here. Ad eas res conficiendas. Now, conficiendas ends in an nd, so we know it's either a gerund or gerundive. And if you said in this circumstance that it is a gerundive, you're right, because gerundives are adjectives. Gerundive is an adjective, so it's describing race. Right next door to it, both accusative, plural. Plus, only gerundives can be plural. Gerunds are only they're only singular, but gerundives can be singular or plural. So, any other prepositional phrases? Well, we'll go after the duxerunt. We'll go to the end of the sentence. We have in tertium annum as well. Let's see here. Verbs. We have duxerunt is our first main verb, and confirmant. Now, there is another verb form in the earlier part of the sentence, and that is esse, the infinitive esse, which you might be wondering, why esse? Doesn't duco mean to lead? And the answer is a little complicated. So duco as a verb, probably 99 times out of 100, means to lead, as you learned from way, way, way back when in Latin 1 in the Red Book. However, sometimes, occasionally, duco can mean to consider. And when you think about it, the verb consider could imply indirect statement, which it does here, which is why we have an infinitive. So they considered that biennium, a 2-year period, was enough for them to accomplish or carry out these things, meaning these tasks. All right? And then finally, in tertium annum, confirmant perfectionem lege. So into the 3rd year, they strengthen their departure with a law. All right. So there you go. Part 1 of Chapter 3. Go ahead, watch the next video for Part 2. Gets interesting.